The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Cedar Ridge as Sarah Martinez stepped out of the employment office for the third time that week. Her worn boots made soft sounds against the wooden boardwalk as she clutched a folded newspaper, its job listings already circled in fatting blue ink. Behind her, 7-year-old Miguel shifted the weight of his small backpack, trying not to let his mother see the worry in his dark eyes. "Mama, are we going home now?" Miguel asked, his voice carrying the innocent hope that only children possess even in the darkest moments. Sarah forced a smile, the kind that mothers perfect when their world is crumbling, but their children need to believe everything will be all right. "Not yet, Mijo. Mama has one more place to try today." The truth was far more desperate than she could ever let Miguel know. 3 months had passed since the accident that took her husband Carlos, and the small savings they had managed to accumulate during his years working construction had dwindled to almost nothing. The rental house they called home would be lost by the end of the week if she couldn't find steady work, and the few odd jobs she had managed to secure cleaning houses and washing dishes at the local diner barely covered food for the two of them. Cedar Ridge wasn't a place that offered many opportunities for a young widow with limited English and no formal education beyond high school. The small Texas town survived primarily on agriculture and ranching, industries that traditionally hired men for the physical labor required. Sarah had tried everything from applying at the grocery store to offering her services as a seamstress, but each door seemed to close before she could even explain her situation. As they walked down Main Street, Sarah noticed Miguel's eyes lingering on the window of Martinez's bakery, no relation despite the shared surname. The smell of fresh bread and sweet pastries drifted through the open door, and she watched her son swallow hard, trying to ignore his empty stomach. They had shared a single piece of toast that morning, and Sarah wasn't sure when their next real meal would come. "Mrs. Martinez," a gentle voice called from behind them. Sarah turned to see Elena Rodriguez, an older woman who attended the same church where Sarah occasionally brought Miguel when she could afford the gas to drive across town. Elena's kind face was creased with concern, and she carried a small paper bag that smelled like fresh tortillas. "I was hoping I might run into you," Elena said, glancing meaningfully at Miguel before meeting Sarah's eyes. "I have some extra food that I made too much of. Would you mind helping me so it doesn't go to waste?" The offer was presented with such dignity that Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion. In their small community, pride was often all a person had left, and Elena understood the delicate balance between offering help and preserving dignity. "That's very kind of you, Mrs. Rodriguez," Sarah replied, accepting the bag with hands that trembled slightly. "Miguel, what do you say?" "Gracias, Mrs. Rodriguez," Miguel said politely, though his eyes showed he understood more about their situation than any 7-year-old should have to. Elena placed a gentle hand on Sarah's shoulder. "There's something else. I heard from my cousin Maria, who works at the big ranch outside town, the Double H spread. She mentioned they might be looking for someone to help with housekeeping and cooking for the workers. It's owned by that man Harrison, the one who owns half the county. Maria says he's fair to his employees, pays decent wages." Hope flickered in Sarah's chest like a candle in the wind. She had heard of Henry Harrison, though she had never seen him in person. Stories about the wealthy rancher varied depending on who told them. Some said he was a hard man who demanded perfection from his employees, while others claimed he was generous to those who proved their worth. "Do you think your cousin could put in a good word for me?" Sarah asked, trying not to sound too desperate. "I already asked her," Elena replied with a warm smile. "She said to come by tomorrow morning around 8, ask for Mrs. Patterson, the head housekeeper. Tell her Maria Rodriguez sent you." That evening in their small rental house with its leaking roof and temperamental heater, Sarah sat at the kitchen table working by the light of a single lamp to save on the electric bill. She had found her one good blouse, the navy blue one she had worn to Carlos's funeral, and was carefully mending a small tear near the collar. Miguel sat across from her, working on his homework with determined concentration. "Mama, will you have to go far away for this new job?" Miguel asked without looking up from his mathematics worksheet. Sarah paused in her sewing, considering how to answer honestly without causing more worry. "It's outside town, but not too far. If I get the job, we'll figure everything out together, okay?" Miguel nodded, but she could see the fear in his posture. Since losing his father, he had become intensely protective of their small family, afraid to let his mother out of his sight for too long. Sarah understood his anxiety because she felt it too, the constant worry that another tragedy might tear away what little stability they had left. As she worked on the blouse, Sarah allowed herself to imagine what it might mean if she got this job. Steady income, benefits perhaps, maybe even housing on the ranch property. She had heard that some of the larger spreads provided living quarters for their employees, which could solve their housing crisis and give Miguel a stable place to call home. The next morning arrived gray and cloudy, with the promise of rain in the heavy air. Sarah dressed carefully in her mended blouse and only pair of dress pants, while Miguel prepared for another day at school. She had arranged for Mrs. Chen, their elderly neighbor, to watch him after school if the job interview ran long. "You look very pretty, Mama," Miguel said as he shouldered his backpack. "Thank you, baby," Sarah replied, smoothing his dark hair. "Remember, go straight to Mrs. Chen's after school, okay? And do your homework." The bus ride to the edge of town cost $2, money she couldn't really spare, but walking the 15 miles to the Double H Ranch wasn't practical in her dress shoes. As the county bus wheezed to a stop at the ranch entrance, Sarah felt her stomach flutter with nervous energy. The entrance to the Double H was marked by an impressive wrought iron gate set between two stone pillars. A paved drive stretched into the distance, lined with mature oak trees that provided shade for the road ahead. Sarah walked carefully, mindful of her shoes on the gravel, taking in the well-maintained fencing and the obvious prosperity of the operation. The main house came into view after a 10-minute walk, and Sarah had to catch her breath at its size and elegance. The sprawling ranch-style home was built from local stone and timber, with a wide covered porch that wrapped around the visible sides of the structure. Well-tended gardens bordered the house, and several smaller buildings were visible in the distance, including what appeared to be worker housing and equipment sheds. Sarah followed a smaller path that led to a side entrance marked with a discreet sign reading, "Staff Entrance." Her heart hammered as she approached the door, knowing that this opportunity might be her last chance to provide for Miguel before they lost everything. She raised her hand to knock, took a deep breath, and rapped gently on the solid wood door. Footsteps approached from inside, and Sarah straightened her shoulders, preparing to present herself as the reliable, hardworking woman she knew herself to be, despite her current circumstances. The door opened to reveal a middle-aged woman with graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. She wore a practical navy dress with a white apron, and her sharp blue eyes assessed Sarah with the quick, experienced gaze of someone used to evaluating new employees. "You must be Sarah Martinez," the woman said in a brisk but not unkind voice. "I'm Mrs. Patterson. Maria Rodriguez spoke to me about you yesterday. Please come in." Sarah stepped into a spacious mudroom that connected to what appeared to be the main kitchen. Everything was clean and organized, from the row of hooks holding various coats and hats to the bench, where several pairs of work boots sat in neat alignment. "Thank you for seeing me, Mrs. Patterson," Sarah said, proud that her voice remained steady despite her nervousness. "Maria speaks very highly of you," Mrs. Patterson replied, leading Sarah into the kitchen proper. "She says you're reliable and hardworking, that you've had some difficult times recently." The kitchen was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen outside of magazines. Professional-grade appliances gleamed under warm lighting, and the extensive counter space was topped with beautiful granite. Despite its size and obvious expense, the room felt welcoming, with personal touches that suggested it was used daily rather than kept for show. "I am looking for steady work, ma'am," Sarah said carefully. "I have experience with housekeeping and cooking, and I'm willing to learn whatever you need me to know." Mrs. Patterson nodded approvingly. The position would involve helping with meal preparation for our ranch hands, maintaining several of the guest rooms we use for visiting cattle buyers, and general housekeeping duties here in the main house. The work is demanding, and Mr. Harrison expects excellence from his staff. "I understand, ma'am. I'm not afraid of hard work." The pay is $15 an hour to start, with the possibility of increases based on performance. There are also benefits after a 90-day probationary period. Are you able to work a flexible schedule? Sometimes we have early mornings or late evenings when we're hosting buyers or during busy seasons. Sarah's heart leaped at the mention of $15 an hour. It was more than she had hoped for, enough to keep them in their current house and maybe even save a little for emergencies. "Yes, ma'am, I can be flexible with my schedule." "Good. Do you have transportation to get here reliably? We're quite a distance from town." This was the question Sarah had been dreading. The truth was that their old car had finally died 2 weeks earlier, and she had no money for repairs. The bus service was limited and didn't always align with early morning or late evening work schedules. "I'm working on transportation, ma'am," she said carefully, hoping it wasn't a complete lie. Perhaps she could find a way to carpool with other employees or save enough for a bicycle. Mrs. Patterson studied her face for a moment, and Sarah worried that her transportation problems had cost her the job before she even had a chance to prove herself. "Well, let's not worry about that just yet," Mrs. Patterson said finally. "Why don't I show you around so you can get a feel for what the work would involve?" For the next hour, Mrs. Patterson led Sarah through various parts of the house and property. The main house was even more impressive than Sarah had initially realized, with multiple guest rooms, a formal dining room, a large den with a stone fireplace, and Mr. Harrison's office, which they passed by quickly with Mrs. Patterson, nodding that it was cleaned only when he was away on business. They visited the bunkhouse where the ranch hands stayed, a comfortable building with a large kitchen and dining area where Sarah would help prepare meals. Mrs. Patterson explained that the ranch employed 8 full-time hands plus seasonal workers during busy periods, and that feeding them properly was essential to maintaining good workers. As they walked back toward the main house, Sarah caught sight of a figure in the distance working with horses in a large corral. Even from far away, she could tell the man had a commanding presence, sitting straight and confident in the saddle as he worked with a young colt that seemed determined to test every boundary. "Is that Mr. Harrison?" she asked, curious about the man who might become her employer. Mrs. Patterson followed her gaze and nodded. "That's him. He's working with one of the new horses. Mr. Harrison handles most of the horse training himself. Says you can't really know an animal unless you put in the time with them personally." Sarah watched for a moment longer, impressed by the patience and skill the distant figure displayed as he worked with the obviously spirited horse. There was something compelling about watching someone who clearly knew their craft work with such quiet competence. "Well, Mrs. Martinez," Mrs. Patterson said as they returned to the kitchen, "I think you might be a good fit for this position. Your references speak well of you, and Maria's word carries weight with me. Would you be interested in starting on Monday? We can try a 2-week trial period to see how things work out for both sides." "Yes, ma'am," Sarah replied immediately, relief flooding through her. "I would be very grateful for the opportunity." "Good. Plan to arrive at 6 in the morning. We serve breakfast to the hands at 6:30, and there's always preparation work to be done before then. Wear comfortable shoes and clothes that you don't mind getting dirty. Ranch work isn't glamorous, but it's honest work." As Sarah walked back down the tree-lined drive, her steps felt lighter despite the distance. For the first time in months, she had hope for the future. The job would provide enough income to keep them housed and fed, and maybe, if she proved herself valuable, there might be opportunities for advancement. She thought about Miguel and how relieved he would be to know that they wouldn't have to move again, that they could stay in the small house that had become their refuge after losing Carlos. She pictured his smile when she told him the good news, the way his shoulders would relax when he understood that his mother had found a way to take care of them both. The bus ride back to town gave her time to think about the challenges ahead. The early morning schedule would require careful planning, especially with Miguel's school routine. The transportation issue was still a problem that needed solving, but Mrs. Patterson had seemed understanding about giving her time to work it out. As the bus rolled past fields and scattered houses, Sarah allowed herself to feel something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. She had been given a chance to prove herself, to show that despite her current circumstances, she was capable of excellence. She thought about the impressive ranch, the well-organized kitchen, and the obvious pride that Mrs. Patterson took in her work. Most of all, she thought about the figure she had seen working with the horses, the patient skill that suggested a man who understood the value of treating living things with respect and care. If Henry Harrison brought the same approach to managing his human employees as he did to training his horses, then perhaps she had found more than just a job. Perhaps she had found a place where hard work and dedication would be recognized and rewarded. That evening, as she tucked Miguel into bed and told him about her new job, Sarah felt a peace she hadn't known since Carlos's death. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and responsibilities, but tonight, for the first time in months, she could sleep without the crushing weight of uncertainty pressing down on her chest. "Mama, are you happy?" Miguel asked sleepily as she smoothed his blanket. "Yes, baby," Sarah replied and realized it was the truth, I think things are going to be okay now." As she turned off his bedroom light, Sarah whispered a prayer of gratitude for the opportunity she had been given and for the kindness of people like Elena Rodriguez and Mrs. Patterson, who had seen her potential rather than just her current struggles. Monday couldn't come soon enough. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything seem possible. Sarah had been awake since 4:30, moving quietly through their small house so as not to wake Miguel before necessary. She had prepared his breakfast the night before and left detailed instructions for Mrs. Chen about his after-school routine. By 5:15, she was standing at the bus stop in the pre-dawn darkness, her thermos of coffee providing warmth for her hands and hope for her heart. The ranch looked different in the early morning light, more alive somehow. Lights glowed in various buildings across the property, and Sarah could hear the sounds of animals stirring and men preparing for the day's work. She made her way to the staff entrance with 5 minutes to spare, proud of her punctuality despite the complex logistics required to get there on time. Mrs. Patterson opened the door before Sarah could knock, her brisk smile indicating approval at Sarah's promptness. "Good morning, Mrs. Martinez. Ready for your first day?" "Yes, ma'am," Sarah replied, following Mrs. Patterson into the warm kitchen where coffee was already brewing and the ingredients for breakfast were laid out on the large central island. "Today you'll be working alongside me so you can learn our routines," Mrs. Patterson explained, handing Sarah an apron. "We feed the hands at 6:30 sharp. They work hard and they work early, so a good breakfast is essential. Mr. Harrison believes that well-fed employees are productive employees." For the next hour, Sarah worked alongside the experienced housekeeper, learning the rhythm of the ranch kitchen. They prepared scrambled eggs, bacon, hash browns, biscuits, and gravy for 8 hungry men, plus fresh fruit and plenty of coffee. Sarah was impressed by Mrs. Patterson's efficiency and the obvious quality of the ingredients they were using. "Mr. Harrison doesn't cut corners when it comes to feeding his people," Mrs. Patterson explained as she showed Sarah how to operate the large commercial-style griddle. "He says a man who's thinking about his next meal isn't thinking about his work." As they carried the food to the bunkhouse dining room, Sarah got her first look at the ranch hands. They were a diverse group, ranging from young men barely out of their teens to weathered cowboys who looked like they had been born in the saddle. All of them greeted Mrs. Patterson with respectful politeness and offered friendly nods to Sarah when she was introduced as the new kitchen helper. "Boys, this is Mrs. Martinez," Mrs. Patterson announced. "She'll be helping me keep you fed and the place running smoothly. I expect you to treat her with the same respect you show me." A chorus of "Yes, ma'am," and "Welcome aboard" greeted her words, and Sarah felt the first stirring of belonging she had experienced since Carlos's death. These men understood hard work and mutual respect, qualities she could appreciate and reciprocate. After breakfast service, Mrs. Patterson led Sarah back to the main house to begin the housekeeping duties. They started with the guest rooms, 3 beautifully appointed spaces that were kept ready for visiting cattle buyers and business associates. Each room was decorated with Western art and quality furniture, and Mrs. Patterson showed Sarah the exacting standards expected for cleanliness and presentation. "Mr. Harrison often conducts important business from this house," Mrs. Patterson explained as they changed linens and dusted furniture. "Sometimes deals worth hundreds of thousands of dollars are discussed in these rooms. Everything must be perfect." Sarah absorbed every detail of the cleaning routine, from the specific products used to the order in which tasks should be completed. She had always taken pride in her housekeeping skills, but Mrs. Patterson's methods elevated cleaning to an art form. Every surface gleamed, every detail was attended to, and the overall effect was one of understated elegance and comfort. As they worked, Mrs. Patterson shared information about the ranch and its operations. The Double H spread covered over 15,000 acres and supported both cattle and horses. Mr. Harrison bred quarter horses that were prized throughout Texas and beyond, and his cattle operation supplied beef to high-end restaurants in Dallas and Houston. "He built all of this from nothing," Mrs. Patterson said with obvious admiration as they polished the dining room table. "Started with a small piece of land and a handful of cattle when he was barely 25. That was over 15 years ago. Now he's one of the most successful ranchers in the county." Sarah found herself curious about the man who had created such an impressive operation. She had glimpsed him briefly during her interview, but had not yet seen him up close. Mrs. Patterson spoke of him with respect bordering on reverence, which suggested he was a fair but demanding employer. Around 10 o'clock, as they were organizing the main kitchen after breakfast cleanup, Sarah heard the sound of boots on the back porch followed by the opening of the mudroom door. Mrs. Patterson immediately straightened, her posture becoming more formal. "That'll be Mr. Harrison," she said quietly. "He usually stops by for coffee around this time." Henry Harrison entered the kitchen, and Sarah got her first close look at her new employer. He was taller than she had expected, with broad shoulders that spoke of physical work rather than office management. His dark hair was touched with gray at the temples, and his face showed the weathering that came from years spent outdoors. But it was his eyes that caught Sarah's attention, sharp and intelligent, the eyes of a man who missed very little. He moved with the confident stride of someone comfortable in his own space, heading directly for the coffee pot with the ease of long habit. As he poured his coffee, his gaze fell on Sarah, and she felt herself being assessed with the same careful attention she imagined he gave to livestock or business deals. "Mr. Harrison, this is Mrs. Martinez, our new kitchen helper," Mrs. Patterson said formally. Henry turned his full attention to Sarah, extending his hand with a firm handshake. "Mrs. Martinez, welcome to the Double H. I hope Mrs. Patterson isn't working you too hard on your first day." "No, sir, not at all," Sarah replied, proud that her voice remained steady despite her nervousness. "Mrs. Patterson has been very kind in showing me everything." "Good to hear. Mrs. Patterson runs a tight ship, but she's fair. You'll learn a lot from her." He sipped his coffee, studying Sarah over the rim of his cup. "You have transportation figured out for getting here reliably." Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks, knowing this was the weak point in her employment. "I'm working on it, sir. The bus service gets me here on time for now." Henry's eyebrows rose slightly. "The county bus? That's a long ride from town, and I don't think the schedule would work for early mornings or late evenings when we need flexibility." "I understand, sir. I'm looking into other options." Henry nodded slowly, but Sarah could see he was filing away this information for future consideration. "Well, see what you can work out. We'll need you to be reliable, especially during busy seasons." He finished his coffee and rinsed the cup in the sink, a gesture that surprised Sarah. She had expected someone of his wealth and position to simply leave such tasks for the staff. "Mrs. Patterson, I'll be in the south pasture most of the day checking the fence line. If Tom Bradley calls about the horse shipment, tell him I'll call him back this evening." "Yes, sir," Mrs. Patterson replied. After Henry left, Sarah realized she had been holding her breath. There was something intensely magnetic about the man, a combination of authority and competence that was both intimidating and appealing. "He seems very focused," Sarah said carefully. Mrs. Patterson smiled. "Mr. Harrison is a good man, but he expects excellence from everyone around him, including himself. He works harder than any of his employees, and he notices everything. If you do your job well, he'll appreciate it. If you don't, he'll know that too." The rest of the morning passed quickly as Sarah learned the routines for lunch preparation. The ranch hands received hearty sandwiches, soup, and plenty of coffee for their midday meal, served from 12 to 12:30 to accommodate their work schedules. Sarah was impressed by the organization required to feed working men on such a precise timeline. During the afternoon, while the hands were back in the field and Mrs. Patterson was handling administrative duties in her small office, Sarah found herself alone in the kitchen for the first time. She used the quiet time to familiarize herself with the equipment and storage systems, taking mental notes about how everything was organized. Through the kitchen window, she could see across the ranch yard to where several horses grazed in a nearby pasture. The sight reminded her of Miguel's fascination with horses, and she wondered if he would ever have the chance to see such beautiful animals up close. The thought of her son brought a familiar tightness to her chest, the constant worry about whether she was providing enough for him, whether the stability of this job would last. Around 3 o'clock, Mrs. Patterson returned with a concerned expression on her face. "Mrs. Martinez, I need to discuss something with you," she said, settling onto one of the kitchen stools. "Mr. Harrison asked me about your transportation situation. He's worried that relying on the county bus isn't sustainable for this position." Sarah's stomach dropped. "I see. Does he want me to find other employment?" "Not necessarily, but he needs to know you can be here consistently. Are there any other options you're considering?" Sarah thought desperately about her limited choices. She couldn't afford a car payment, and even a used vehicle would require money she didn't have for repairs and insurance. Carpooling might be possible, but she didn't know any other employees who lived near town. "I could look into getting a bicycle for when the weather's good," she said finally, knowing how inadequate that sounded for a 15-mile commute. Mrs. Patterson sighed sympathetically. "Mrs. Martinez, may I ask about your situation? Maria mentioned that you're recently widowed and have a child. Are you managing all right financially?" The kindness in her voice nearly undid Sarah's careful composure. For months, she had been carrying the weight of her struggles alone, presenting a strong face to the world while privately battling fear and uncertainty. "We're getting by," she said carefully. "This job means everything to us. I'll find a way to make the transportation work." Mrs. Patterson studied her face for a moment, then made a decision that would change everything. "Wait here. I think I need to speak with Mr. Harrison about this." Before Sarah could object, Mrs. Patterson had left the kitchen, heading in the direction of the ranch office. Sarah remained behind, her heart pounding with the fear that her employment was about to end before it had really begun. She thought about Miguel, who would be getting out of school soon, expecting to hear good news about her first day. She thought about the rent that was due and the groceries they needed, all dependent on this job that was slipping away because of something as simple as transportation. 20 minutes later, Sarah heard the sound of 2 sets of footsteps approaching the kitchen. Mrs. Patterson returned accompanied by Henry Harrison, whose expression was thoughtful rather than dismissive. "Mrs. Martinez," Henry said, settling against the kitchen counter with his arms crossed. "Mrs. Patterson tells me you're in a difficult situation with transportation. She also tells me that you've done excellent work today and that she believes you'd be a valuable addition to our staff." "Yes, sir," Sarah replied, unsure what else to say. "Here's what I'm thinking. We have a small apartment above the equipment garage that's been sitting empty for over a year. It's nothing fancy, but it's clean and comfortable. 2 bedrooms, kitchen, living area. If you and your son would like to live on the property, it would solve your transportation problem and give you more flexible hours." Sarah stared at him, certain she had misunderstood. "You're offering us a place to live." "In exchange for being available for early morning and evening work when needed," Henry clarified. "Sometimes we have buyers arrive at unusual hours, or we need extra help during calving season or horse shows. Having someone on site would be valuable for the operation." I don't know what to say. "The apartment comes with the job, no additional rent. Utilities included. There's a good school bus route that stops right at the ranch entrance, so your son would have reliable transportation to school." Sarah felt tears threatening and blinked them back, not wanting to appear unprofessional. "That's incredibly generous, sir, but I should ask about Miguel. He's 7, and he'd be living here too." "I assumed as much. Is he a responsible child?" "Very responsible, sir." "Good. The ranch can be a good place for a boy to grow up, learn about hard work and taking care of things. As long as he understands the rules about staying away from the equipment and livestock unless supervised." "He would understand, sir. He's very good at following rules." Henry nodded. "Then if you're interested, you can move in this weekend. Mrs. Patterson can show you the apartment after work today." As Henry left the kitchen for the second time that day, Sarah stood in stunned silence. In the span of 8 hours, her life had transformed from desperate uncertainty to unexpected security. Not only did she have steady employment, but she and Miguel would have a safe, comfortable home on one of the most beautiful properties she had ever seen. "Well, don't just stand there," Mrs. Patterson said with a warm smile. "We have dinner to prepare for the hands, and you'll want to see your new home before the day's over." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of activity and emotion. Sarah threw herself into learning the dinner routine, amazed at how different her life looked now compared to the morning. As she worked, she found herself glancing out the windows at the rolling pastures and well-maintained buildings, trying to absorb that this would soon be Miguel's daily view as well. When Mrs. Patterson finally led her to the apartment above the garage, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The space was indeed modest, but it was immaculately maintained and beautifully appointed. The living area was filled with natural light from large windows that overlooked the horse pastures. The kitchen was small but modern, with quality appliances and plenty of cabinet space. The 2 bedrooms were perfectly sized for her and Miguel, and the bathroom featured a large tub that she knew her son would love. "Mr. Harrison had this renovated about 18 months ago," Mrs. Patterson explained as they toured the space. He was planning to use it for a ranch manager, but ended up promoting from within instead. It's been empty ever since. "It's perfect," Sarah whispered, running her hand along the smooth countertop in the kitchen. "I can't believe this is real." "Mr. Harrison is a good judge of character," Mrs. Patterson said. "He sees potential in people, and he's willing to invest in those who prove their worth. You made a good impression today." As Sarah rode the bus back to town that evening, she could barely contain her excitement about sharing the news with Miguel. For the first time since Carlos's death, she could offer her son something more than just survival. She could offer him stability, beauty, and a chance to grow up in a place where hard work was valued and rewarded. The small rental house that had been their refuge would soon be left behind, along with the constant worry about rent and utilities. In its place would be a new chapter, one filled with possibility and hope. Sarah thought about Henry Harrison's quiet generosity, Mrs. Patterson's patient teaching, and the unexpected kindness that had transformed a simple job into a complete change of fortune. Miguel's face when she told him the news was everything she had hoped for. His eyes went wide with wonder as she described the ranch, the horses, the apartment that would be their new home. For the first time in months, she saw pure excitement in her son's expression, untainted by worry or fear. "Can I really see the horses, Mama?" he asked, bouncing on his bed. "Every day, Mijo," Sarah replied, pulling him close. "Every single day." As she tucked him in that night, Miguel asked the question that had been on his mind all evening. "Mama, why is Mr. Harrison being so nice to us?" Sarah considered the question carefully, wanting to give him an answer that was both truthful and appropriate for his age. "I think some people understand what it's like to work hard and need a chance to prove yourself. Mr. Harrison seems like the kind of man who helps people who are willing to help themselves. Like how Daddy always said we should treat people." Moving day arrived with the golden light of early autumn, and Sarah felt like she was walking into a dream. The few possessions she and Miguel owned fit easily into Mrs. Patterson's pickup truck, a fact that was both humbling and liberating. As they drove through the ranch gates for what would now be their daily routine, Miguel pressed his face to the window, watching the horses in the pastures with wide-eyed fascination. "Look, Mama, there are so many of them," he whispered, as if speaking too loudly might make them disappear. Their new apartment felt even more spacious than Sarah remembered, perhaps because she no longer had to imagine herself living there. Miguel ran from room to room, his footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors as he explored every corner of their new home. The bedroom, he claimed, overlooked the main horse corral, and he spent several minutes just watching the animals through his window. "Mr. Harrison said you might like to meet some of the horses properly," Mrs. Patterson said, watching Miguel's obvious delight. "But first you need to learn the safety rules. Horses are big, powerful animals that demand respect." "Can I really meet them?" Miguel asked, turning from the window with excitement dancing in his dark eyes. "If your mother approves and you prove you can follow directions, I don't see why not. Mr. Harrison believes children should learn about animals and responsibility." Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest at this unexpected kindness. Carlos had always promised Miguel that someday they would visit a real ranch, a promise that had seemed impossible to keep after his death. Now, through an extraordinary turn of circumstances, her son would have daily access to experiences most children only dreamed about. The transition into ranch life proved easier than Sarah had dared hope. Her work routine expanded naturally to include additional responsibilities that came with living on the property. She began arriving at the main kitchen an hour earlier to help with breakfast preparation, and she stayed later in the evenings to assist with dinner cleanup and preparation for the next day. The ranch hands quickly accepted her presence as part of the daily rhythm, and several of them took special interest in Miguel's fascination with their work. Jake Morrison, the youngest of the cowboys at barely 22, seemed particularly fond of answering Miguel's endless questions about horses and cattle. Tommy Rodriguez, no relation to Alina despite sharing a surname, patiently explained the different breeds of horses and what made each one special. "That bay mare there, she's one of Mr. Harrison's favorites," Tommy told Miguel one evening as they watched the horses being brought in from pasture. "Her name's Estrella, and she's got bloodlines going back to some of the greatest cutting horses in Texas." Miguel absorbed every detail with the intensity of a scholar, asking thoughtful questions that impressed the cowboys with his genuine interest. Sarah watched these interactions with a mixture of gratitude and amazement, seeing her son blossom in ways she had never expected. Henry Harrison remained a somewhat distant figure in their daily lives, but Sarah found herself increasingly aware of his presence around the ranch. She would catch glimpses of him working with horses in the training arena, his movements fluid and confident as he guided the animals through their exercises. Sometimes she heard his voice drifting from the ranch office as he conducted business calls with cattle buyers or horse trainers from across the region. Their first real conversation since moving day came during her third week on the property. Sarah was in the main kitchen preparing lunch when Henry entered, as was his custom around mid-morning. Instead of simply pouring his coffee and leaving, he lingered, seeming to have something on his mind. "How are you and your son settling in, Mrs. Martinez?" he asked, leaning against the counter in a posture that suggested he had time for a real conversation. "Very well, sir. Miguel loves it here, and I can't thank you enough for the opportunity. The boy seems bright. I've watched him with the horses, and he shows good instincts around animals. That's not something you can teach." Sarah felt a surge of pride at the compliment. He's always been fascinated by animals. His father used to say he had a gift for understanding them. Something in Henry's expression shifted, becoming more serious. "Mrs. Patterson mentioned that you're recently widowed. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you, sir. It's been difficult, but this job, this place, it's given us hope again." Henry nodded slowly, studying her face with those perceptive eyes. "Building something from loss takes courage. I respect that." There was something in his tone that made Sarah wonder if he spoke from personal experience, but she didn't feel comfortable asking. Instead, she focused on cleaning the already spotless counter, unsure how to respond to such personal observations from her employer. "I've been thinking about your son's interest in the horses," Henry continued. "With your permission, I'd like to start teaching him basic horsemanship. Nothing dangerous, just groundwork and safety procedures. It would be good for him to have structure and responsibility." Sarah's cloth stilled on the counter. "You would do that?" "A boy growing up on a ranch should understand horses. Besides, I could use an extra pair of hands in the stable, even small ones. Miguel could learn to help with feeding and grooming, earn a little spending money for his efforts." "That's incredibly generous, sir, but I wouldn't want him to be a bother." "Mrs. Martinez," Henry said with what might have been the beginning of a smile, "I wouldn't have offered if I thought he'd be a bother. I've been around enough children to know the difference between those who are ready for responsibility and those who aren't. Your son is ready." That evening, when Sarah told Miguel about Mr. Harrison's offer, his reaction was everything she had hoped for. He sat quietly for a long moment, as if processing the magnitude of what he was being offered, then looked at her with serious eyes. "Mama, does this mean I get to work with the horses like a real cowboy?" "It means you get to learn about horses and help take care of them. But Miguel, this is a big responsibility. Mr. Harrison is trusting you with his animals, and they're very valuable. You have to promise me you'll always follow his instructions exactly." "I promise, Mama. I promise with all my heart." Miguel's first lesson with Henry took place on a Saturday morning when the regular ranch work was lighter. Sarah watched from the kitchen window as Henry led her son into the main stable. Nodding the patient way, he adjusted his stride to match Miguel's shorter steps. She couldn't hear their conversation, but she could see Henry pointing to different equipment and Miguel nodding earnestly at whatever instructions he was receiving. When they emerged an hour later, Miguel was glowing with excitement, but his movements were careful and controlled, suggesting he had absorbed important lessons about safety and respect around the powerful animals. Henry's expression was approving, and he rested a brief hand on Miguel's shoulder in a gesture that spoke of satisfaction with his new student. "He's a natural," Henry told Sarah later that day. "Calm energy around the horses, good listening skills, and he asks intelligent questions. You should be proud of him." "I am, sir. This means the world to him." "Good. We'll start with 15 minutes every morning before school and an hour on Saturday mornings. He'll begin with basic stable chores, learning to clean stalls and organize equipment. As he proves himself reliable, we'll move on to actual horse handling." The transformation in Miguel over the following weeks was remarkable. He approached his horse-related responsibilities with a seriousness that impressed everyone who worked with him. He arrived at the stable each morning with his homework completed and his school clothes laid out, ready to spend his allotted time learning from Henry before catching the school bus at the ranch entrance. Sarah found herself developing a routine that centered around supporting both Miguel's new interests and her expanding role on the ranch. She began staying later in the evenings to help with dinner preparation, enjoying the camaraderie that developed among the staff as they worked together to keep the operation running smoothly. Mrs. Patterson had become more than just a supervisor. She was becoming a friend and mentor, someone who understood the challenges of being a woman in a male-dominated environment, and who offered guidance on everything from work techniques to managing Miguel's schedule around his horse responsibilities. "You found your rhythm," Mrs. Patterson observed one evening as they cleaned up after serving dinner to a group of cattle buyers who had come to evaluate Henry's herd. "Mr. Harrison has noticed how well you've adapted to the work." "I hope so. I want to prove worthy of the chance he gave us." "You already have. I've worked for Mr. Harrison for 5 years, and I've never seen him take such personal interest in teaching a child. He must see something special in Miguel." Sarah had noticed the same thing. Henry's interactions with her son went beyond simple instruction. He seemed genuinely invested in Miguel's development, both as a horseman and as a young man. She often saw them engaged in serious conversations, Henry's voice patient and encouraging as he explained concepts that ranged from horse psychology to the broader lessons that came from working with animals. One evening, as Sarah was finishing the kitchen cleanup, she heard Miguel's voice drifting from the stable area, where he was helping Henry with the evening feeding routine. Curious, she stepped onto the back porch to listen. "Mr. Harrison, why do some horses trust people right away and others take a long time?" Miguel was asking. "Well, Miguel, horses are a lot like people in that way," Henry replied, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. "Some have had good experiences with humans and learned to trust. Others have been hurt or scared, so they're more careful about who they let get close to them. Like people who have been hurt might not trust so easy." "Exactly like that. The key is patience and consistency. You show them through your actions that you're safe, that you won't hurt them or let them down. Eventually, most animals will give you a chance if you prove you deserve it." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes at the gentle wisdom in Henry's words, recognizing that the conversation was about more than just horses. She thought about her own cautious journey toward trusting this new situation, how she had been afraid to hope that their good fortune might last. The sound of their voices grew closer, indicating they were walking toward the house, so Sarah slipped back inside to avoid being caught eavesdropping. A few minutes later, Miguel bounced into the kitchen, his face glowing with the satisfaction that came from meaningful work. "Mama, I helped Mr. Harrison feed all the horses, and Estrella let me brush her neck. Mr. Harrison said she's starting to trust me." "That's wonderful, baby. Did you remember to thank Mr. Harrison for teaching you?" "Yes, ma'am. And he said tomorrow he might show me how to clean a horse's hooves if I do a good job cleaning the stalls." As Sarah tucked Miguel into bed that night, she reflected on the dramatic changes in their lives. 2 months ago, they had been facing eviction and an uncertain future. Now Miguel was learning skills that would serve him for life, while she had found work that challenged and fulfilled her in ways she had never expected. Looking out Miguel's bedroom window at the peaceful ranch landscape bathed in moonlight, Sarah felt a contentment she had thought lost forever. The horses stood quietly in their pastures, the stable lights glowed warmly in the distance, and somewhere in the main house, Henry Harrison was probably reviewing the day's work and planning tomorrow's activities. She thought about the man who had changed their lives with his unexpected generosity, wondering what experiences had shaped his character and his willingness to invest in others. There was something about Henry that suggested depths beneath his professional exterior, a complexity that intrigued her even as she maintained the appropriate boundaries of their employer-employee relationship. As she settled into her own bed in their comfortable apartment, Sarah whispered a prayer of gratitude for the second chance they had been given. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight she could rest in the knowledge that she and Miguel were exactly where they needed to be. The last thing she heard before drifting off to sleep was the gentle nickering of horses in the nearby pastures, a sound that had become as comforting as a lullaby. Their new life at the Double H Ranch was more than she had ever dared to dream, and she was determined to prove herself worthy of the trust that had been placed in her. In the main house, Henry Harrison stood at his office window, looking out over the ranch that represented his life's work. He thought about the widow and her son who had brought new energy to his operation, and about the satisfaction he felt in watching them both flourish in their new environment. Sarah Martinez had proven herself to be exactly what he had hoped: hardworking, reliable, and grateful for the opportunity she had been given. Her son showed promise that went beyond his natural affinity for horses, displaying the kind of character that could be shaped into something exceptional with proper guidance and encouragement. As Henry prepared for bed, he found himself looking forward to the next day's work with an anticipation he hadn't felt in years. Having Sarah and Miguel as part of his ranch family had added a dimension to daily life that he hadn't realized was missing. Tomorrow, he would continue Miguel's education in horsemanship, and he would enjoy watching Sarah's continued growth in her expanding role. The Double H Ranch had always been successful, but now it felt truly complete, like a family rather than just a business operation. Henry smiled as he turned off the lights, already planning the next lessons he would share with his eager young student and thinking about the bright future that lay ahead for all of them. In just 4 more days, she and Miguel would begin their new life at the Double H Ranch, and Sarah found herself looking forward to discovering what other surprises lay ahead. Winter settled over the Double H Ranch with a quiet beauty that transformed the familiar landscape into something magical. Snow dusted the rolling pastures, and ice formed delicate patterns on the water troughs that Miguel would examine with scientific fascination each morning before his stable duties. The horses grew thick winter coats that made them look like living teddy bears, and the ranch hands traded their summer hats for warm caps with ear flaps. Sarah had been living and working at the ranch for nearly 4 months, and the rhythm of ranch life had become as natural as breathing. Her responsibilities had expanded gradually, with Henry's approval, to include managing supply orders for the kitchen and coordinating meal planning for special events. Mrs. Patterson had begun training her on the administrative aspects of running a large household, skills that Sarah absorbed eagerly. "You have a natural aptitude for organization," Mrs. Patterson observed one December morning as they reviewed the menu plans for a weekend horse show that would bring visitors to the ranch. "Mr. Harrison has noticed how efficiently you handle multiple tasks." Sarah felt warmth spread through her chest at the compliment. Over the months, she had worked hard to prove herself indispensable, always volunteering for additional duties and approaching every task with meticulous attention to detail. The financial security of steady employment had allowed her to relax enough to take pride in her work rather than simply scrambling to survive each day. Miguel's transformation had been even more dramatic. Under Henry's patient tutelage, he had developed genuine skill in handling horses and had earned the respect of the ranch hands for his dedication and natural ability. What had started as basic stable chores had evolved into more complex responsibilities, including helping to train young horses and assisting with the breeding program's record-keeping. "That boy has better instincts with horses than some men who have been around them for years," Jake Morrison commented one evening as they watched Miguel work with a young colt that had been resistant to human contact. "Look how he just stands there, letting the horse come to him instead of forcing it." Henry had been thinking the same thing. Miguel's intuitive understanding of horse psychology was remarkable for someone his age, and his willingness to learn extended far beyond animal care into broader lessons about responsibility, integrity, and the rewards of hard work. "Miguel," Henry said as they finished the evening feeding routine, "I want to talk to you about something important." Miguel immediately gave him his full attention, a response that Henry had come to appreciate about the boy. Unlike many children, Miguel understood when adults had something serious to discuss, and he offered his complete focus rather than half-hearted attention. "You've been working with the horses for several months now, and you've shown that you can handle responsibility. I'm thinking about giving you a bigger role in the operation, but it would mean more time commitment and higher expectations." Miguel's eyes widened with interest rather than concern. "What kind of bigger role, Mr. Harrison?" "I'd like you to become my official assistant for the young horse training program. It would mean working with me every day after school for at least an hour, plus longer sessions on weekends. You'd help with record keeping, assist with basic training exercises, and eventually learn to work with the horses independently under supervision." "Would I get paid like a real employee?" Henry smiled at the boy's practical question. "Yes, you'd receive a proper wage for your work, but more importantly, you'd be learning skills that could serve you for the rest of your life. The horse industry values people who understand animals and can work with integrity." Miguel was quiet for a moment, processing the magnitude of what was being offered. Mr. Harrison, does this mean you think I'm good enough to be a real horse trainer someday? Miguel, I think you have the potential to be exceptional at whatever you choose to do with your life. Whether that's horses or something else entirely, you're developing qualities that will make you successful. That evening, Miguel burst into their apartment with excitement, immediately launching into a detailed explanation of Henry's offer. Sarah listened with a mixture of pride and amazement, watching her son's face glow with enthusiasm as he described the responsibilities he would be taking on. Mama, Mr. Harrison thinks I could be really good at working with horses. He said I might even help him train horses that get sold to other ranches. That's wonderful, baby, but this sounds like a big commitment. Are you sure you can handle it along with your schoolwork? I've been thinking about that, Miguel said seriously. My grades are really good now, better than they've ever been, and working with Mr. Harrison has taught me about being organized and responsible. I think I can do both. Sarah studied her son's face, seeing not just excitement but genuine maturity in his expression. The months at the ranch had indeed changed him, giving him confidence and purpose that showed in everything from his improved posture to his thoughtful way of speaking. If this is what you want, then I'm proud of you, Sarah said, pulling him into a hug. But remember, this is a real job with real responsibilities. Mr. Harrison is trusting you with valuable animals. I understand, Mama. I won't let him down. The next morning, Sarah sought out Henry to discuss Miguel's new role and to express her gratitude for the opportunities he continued to provide her son. She found him in the main stable, working with a young stallion that was being prepared for sale to a breeding program in Oklahoma. His movements were fluid and confident as he guided the horse through various exercises, demonstrating the kind of expertise that made the Double H's horses highly sought after throughout the region. Mr. Harrison, Sarah called softly, not wanting to disturb his concentration. Henry brought the stallion to a halt and turned toward her, his expression immediately attentive. Mrs. Martinez, what can I do for you? I wanted to thank you for the opportunity you're giving Miguel. This position means everything to him. He's earned it through his own efforts, Henry replied, leading the stallion to a nearby stall. I don't offer responsibilities like this lightly. Miguel has proven himself reliable and dedicated. Still, not many employers would take such personal interest in an employee's child. I'm grateful for your kindness. Henry secured the stallion and turned to face Sarah fully, his expression becoming more serious. Mrs. Martinez, can I speak frankly with you? Of course, sir. I've been watching you and Miguel for months now, and I've been impressed not just with your work ethic, but with your character. You're raising a remarkable young man under difficult circumstances, and you've both brought something valuable to this ranch. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks at the unexpected praise. Thank you, sir. That means a great deal coming from you. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand that your position here isn't temporary or dependent on charity. You've proven yourself essential to this operation, and I hope you'll consider making the Double H your long-term home. The words hit Sarah with unexpected force, bringing tears to her eyes that she quickly blinked away. For months, she had lived with the underlying fear that their good fortune was temporary, that some change in circumstances might force them to leave the security they had found. I can't imagine wanting to be anywhere else, she said quietly. This place has given us everything we needed to rebuild our lives. Good, because I have another proposition for you. Sarah's breath caught, wondering what other generosity Henry might be planning to offer. Mrs. Patterson has been thinking about reducing her hours as she gets closer to retirement. She suggested that you might be ready to take on more administrative responsibilities, eventually working toward becoming the head housekeeper and property manager. Sarah stared at him, certain she had misunderstood. Head housekeeper, but I've only been here 4 months. Mrs. Patterson has been here 5 years, and she says you've learned in 4 months what took her 2 years to master. She believes you have the skills and judgment necessary for the position. I don't know what to say. Say you'll consider it. The position would come with a substantial increase in salary and additional benefits. You'd be responsible for managing all aspects of the household operations, coordinating with vendors, and overseeing any additional staff we might hire as the ranch continues to grow. As Henry outlined the details of the potential promotion, Sarah felt the same disorienting sensation she had experienced on her first day, when her world had suddenly expanded beyond anything she had thought possible. The salary he mentioned was more than double what she was currently earning, enough to provide Miguel with opportunities she had only dreamed of offering him. The transition would be gradual, Henry continued. Mrs. Patterson would work with you over the next 6 months to ensure you're comfortable with all aspects of the role. She's eager to begin stepping back, but she wants to make sure the ranch continues to operate at the same level of excellence. Mr. Harrison, I'm honored that you would consider me for such a position, but are you sure I'm qualified? Managing an operation like this requires experience I don't have. Mrs. Martinez, you've been managing crisis and uncertainty for months while maintaining your composure and taking excellent care of your son. You've mastered our current systems quickly and shown initiative in improving processes. Most importantly, you understand that this ranch is more than just a business. It's a way of life that requires dedication and integrity. That evening, as Sarah prepared dinner in their apartment kitchen while Miguel worked on homework at the table, she found herself struggling to process the rapid changes in their circumstances. In less than a year, they had gone from facing eviction to being offered positions of genuine responsibility and respect. "Mama, you seem worried about something," Miguel observed, looking up from his math problems. "Is everything okay?" Sarah paused in her cooking, considering how to share the news without overwhelming him with the magnitude of the changes ahead. "Mr. Harrison has offered me a promotion, baby. It would mean more responsibilities, but also more money and job security." "That's good, right? You deserve it because you work so hard." "Yes, it's very good, but it's also a little scary because it's such an important position. I want to make sure I can do the job well." Miguel set down his pencil and looked at her with serious eyes that seemed older than his 7 years. "Mama, remember when you told me that Mr. Harrison doesn't offer things to people unless he thinks they can handle it?" Sarah smiled, recognizing her own words being offered back to her. "You're right, Mijo, I did say that." "Well, if Mr. Harrison thinks you can be the head housekeeper, then you probably can. He's really smart about people." The simple wisdom of her son's observation cut through Sarah's anxiety, reminding her that she had already proven herself capable of handling challenges far greater than learning new administrative duties. She had navigated widowhood, near poverty, and single parenthood while maintaining her dignity and raising a remarkable child. Managing household operations, no matter how complex, was within her capabilities. Over the following weeks, Mrs. Patterson began the gradual process of training Sarah for the expanded role. The work was demanding and detail-oriented, requiring coordination with multiple vendors, management of complex schedules, and oversight of budgets that Sarah had never imagined being responsible for. The key to managing Mr. Harrison's expectations is anticipating his needs before he has to ask, Mrs. Patterson explained, as they reviewed the upcoming schedule for a major cattle sale that would bring dozens of buyers to the ranch. "He appreciates efficiency and attention to detail, but most of all, he values initiative and problem-solving skills." Sarah absorbed every lesson eagerly, taking detailed notes and asking thoughtful questions about the reasoning behind various procedures. She discovered that she enjoyed the challenge of complex logistics and found satisfaction in the smooth execution of events that required careful planning and coordination. Meanwhile, Miguel was flourishing in his new role as Henry's assistant. The increased responsibility had given him a sense of purpose that showed in everything from his improved academic performance to his confident interactions with visiting horse buyers. Henry had begun including him in discussions about breeding decisions and training techniques, treating him as a junior colleague rather than simply a child helper. "Your son has an exceptional mind for this work," Henry told Sarah one evening as they discussed Miguel's progress. "He asks insightful questions and remembers details that many adults would forget. I'm thinking about entering him in some of the youth horsemanship competitions next spring." Competitions, regional events where young people demonstrate their skills in horse handling and care. Miguel has the ability to compete at a high level, and the experience would be valuable for his development. Sarah felt a familiar tightness in her throat, the emotion that came whenever she realized how dramatically their lives had changed. A year ago, Miguel's biggest concern had been whether they would have enough food for dinner. Now he was being prepared for competitions that could open doors to opportunities she had never imagined possible. As winter deepened and the ranch settled into its quieter seasonal rhythm, Sarah found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. The desperation and fear that had once defined her daily existence had been replaced by confidence and purpose. She was no longer simply surviving. She was building a future for herself and her son. Standing at their apartment window one snowy evening, watching Miguel help Henry with the evening horse care routine, Sarah felt a profound sense of gratitude for the man who had seen potential in a desperate widow and her young son. Henry Harrison had given them more than just jobs and housing. He had given them dignity, purpose, and hope for a future they had thought lost forever. The warm light spilling from the stable created a golden glow in the falling snow, and Sarah could hear the gentle sounds of horses settling in for the night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight she could rest in the knowledge that she and Miguel had found their place in the world, a place where hard work was valued and dreams could become reality. As Miguel's laughter drifted across the ranch yard, mixing with Henry's deeper voice in conversation, Sarah smiled and began preparing for another day in the life they were building together at the Double H Ranch. Spring arrived at the Double H Ranch with an explosion of wildflowers that painted the pastures in brilliant yellows, blues, and reds. Sarah had been serving as head housekeeper for 2 months, and the transition had proven even smoother than anyone had anticipated. Under her management, the ranch operations had become more efficient while maintaining the high standards that Henry demanded. The administrative responsibilities that had once seemed daunting had become second nature, and Sarah found genuine satisfaction in coordinating the complex logistics required to keep the ranch running smoothly. She had successfully managed 3 major events, including a regional quarter-horse show that brought visitors from across the Southwest, all while maintaining the daily routines that kept the ranch hands fed and the guest facilities pristine. Miguel, now 8 years old and seasoned in his role as Henry's assistant, had developed into a young horseman whose skills impressed visiting professionals. His natural talent, combined with Henry's patient instruction, had created a level of expertise that was remarkable for someone his age. The regional competitions Henry had mentioned were now less than a month away, and Miguel's excitement was infectious. "Mrs. Martinez," Henry said one morning as Sarah reviewed supply orders in the ranch office, "I have something I'd like to discuss with you." Sarah looked up from her computer, nodding the formal tone that suggested an important conversation. "Of course, Mr. Harrison, what can I do for you?" "It's about Miguel's competitions. The regional youth championships are being held in Fort Worth next month, and I believe he's ready to compete at the highest level." "That's wonderful news. Miguel will be thrilled." "The thing is, these competitions often serve as stepping stones to larger opportunities. There will be representatives from youth programs, scholarship foundations, and even college recruiters watching the events. Miguel's performance could open doors to educational opportunities that would serve him for life." Sarah felt the familiar flutter of excitement mixed with concern that came whenever Miguel's future was discussed. What would he be competing in specifically? "Several events, horsemanship demonstrations, where judges evaluate the rider's skill and the horse's response to commands. Stable management, where participants demonstrate proper care techniques. And written examinations covering everything from animal psychology to business management." "Miguel knows all of that." Henry smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face. "Sarah, your son has absorbed more information in the past year than many people learn in a lifetime. He doesn't just follow instructions, he understands the reasoning behind everything he does. That kind of comprehensive knowledge is exactly what these competitions are designed to evaluate." That evening, when Sarah shared the news with Miguel, his reaction was everything she had hoped for. His face lit up with excitement, but she could also see the seriousness with which he approached the opportunity. "Mama, do you think I'm really ready for this? These will be kids from big ranches who have been doing this their whole lives." Sarah sat down next to her son on their couch, pulling him close. "Miguel, a year ago we didn't even know what a cutting horse was. Look how much you've learned, how hard you've worked. Mr. Harrison believes you're ready, and I trust his judgment completely." "What if I don't do well? What if I embarrass Mr. Harrison after everything he's taught me?" "Baby, the fact that you're asking that question shows me you have exactly the right attitude. You're not overconfident, but you're not afraid either. You want to do your best because you respect what you've been taught. That's the mark of a true horseman. The preparations for the competition became a ranch-wide effort. The cowboys offered advice and encouragement, sharing stories of their own experiences in various competitions. Mrs. Patterson helped Sarah coordinate the travel arrangements, booking rooms in Fort Worth and planning meals that would keep Miguel comfortable during the stressful event. Henry intensified Miguel's training schedule, working with him daily on the specific skills that would be evaluated. Sarah often watched from the kitchen window as they worked together in the main arena, Henry's patient voice carrying instructions, while Miguel guided his assigned horse through increasingly complex exercises. "Your boys got something special," Jake Morrison commented one evening as they all watched Miguel demonstrate a particularly difficult maneuver. "I've been around horses my whole life, and I've never seen anyone his age read an animal the way he does." 2 weeks before the competition, Henry approached Sarah with another conversation that would change their lives in unexpected ways. "Sarah, I want to discuss something that goes beyond Miguel's competition," he said, settling into the chair across from her desk in the ranch office. "It's about the future of the Double H and your family's role in it." Sarah saved her work and gave him her full attention, recognizing the tone that indicated serious business. "This ranch has been my life's work for over 15 years. I've built it into one of the most successful operations in Texas, but I've always known that someday I'd need to think about succession planning." "Succession planning? Who will run this place when I'm no longer able to? I've been watching you and Miguel, seeing how you've both embraced not just the work but the values that make this ranch what it is. You understand that this is more than a business. It's a way of life built on integrity, hard work, and respect for the land and animals." Sarah felt her pulse quicken, sensing that Henry was leading up to something significant. "I've been thinking about establishing a formal partnership arrangement, something that would eventually give you and Miguel ownership stakes in the ranch. It would be structured as a gradual transition, allowing you to earn equity through continued excellent performance and commitment to the operation." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow, leaving her momentarily speechless. The idea that she and Miguel might someday own part of the Double H Ranch was so far beyond anything she had ever imagined that she couldn't immediately process it. "Mr. Harrison, I don't understand. You're talking about giving us ownership in your ranch." "I'm talking about investing in people who have proven themselves worthy of investment. Sarah, you've transformed our operations in ways that have improved efficiency and profitability. Miguel has the potential to become one of the finest horsemen in the state, maybe the country. Together, you represent the kind of family values and work ethic that could carry this ranch forward for another generation." "But we've only been here a year. Surely there are others who have been with you longer who have more experience." Henry leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Experience can be valuable, but character is irreplaceable. You've both shown character under pressure, and you've embraced opportunities for growth rather than simply maintaining the status quo. That's what this ranch needs for its future." As Henry explained the details of his proposal, Sarah found herself struggling to believe what she was hearing. The partnership would begin immediately, but vest gradually over 10 years, giving her and Miguel increasing ownership stakes as they proved themselves in expanded roles. Miguel would be groomed not just as a horse trainer, but as a future ranch manager, while Sarah would oversee all administrative and operational aspects of the property. "There would be formal education components," Henry continued. "Miguel would receive the best possible training in animal science, business management, and agricultural technology. You'd have opportunities for professional development in ranch management and agricultural business practices." "Mr. Harrison, this is incredibly generous, but why? Why would you take such a risk on people you've known for less than a year?" Henry was quiet for a long moment, looking out the office window toward the pastures where his horses grazed in the afternoon sun. 20 years ago, I was a young man with big dreams and no money, working for a rancher outside San Antonio. I had ideas about how to improve his operation, but no one wanted to listen to suggestions from a hired hand. One day, I worked up the courage to approach the owner with a proposal for breeding program improvements. Henry paused, his expression distant with memory. Instead of dismissing me, he listened. Not only that, but he implemented my suggestions and gave me credit when they proved successful. When he retired 5 years later, he offered to sell me a portion of his land at below-market rates, providing the foundation for what eventually became the Double H. Sarah began to understand the deeper motivation behind Henry's generosity. He saw potential in me when I couldn't see it in myself. He took a risk on someone who had the drive to succeed but lacked the resources to prove it. I've never forgotten that lesson. So you're paying it forward? I'm investing in the future. But Sarah, I want you to understand that this isn't charity. This is a business decision based on proven performance and observed character. I wouldn't offer this opportunity unless I believed you and Miguel could handle the responsibilities that come with it. That night, Sarah lay awake staring at the ceiling of their comfortable apartment, trying to process the magnitude of what had been offered. Partnership in one of the most successful ranches in Texas. Educational opportunities that could prepare Miguel for leadership in an industry he already loved. Financial security that would allow them to build generational wealth rather than simply surviving from paycheck to paycheck. The next morning, she found Miguel in the stable, working through his morning routine with the focused concentration that had become his trademark. He was grooming Estrella, the bay mare who had become his favorite, talking softly to her as he worked. "Miguel, we need to have an important conversation," Sarah said, settling onto a nearby hay bale. As she explained Henry's proposal, she watched her son's expression cycle through surprise, excitement, and then serious contemplation. When she finished, Miguel was quiet for several minutes, continuing to brush Estrella's coat while he processed the information. "Mama, does this mean we'd really own part of the ranch someday?" "If we continue to prove ourselves worthy of Mr. Harrison's trust, yes. And I could learn everything about running a ranch, not just working with horses." "That's what he's proposing." Miguel set down the brush and turned to face her directly. "Mama, I know this is scary for you. Big changes are always scary, but I think we should say yes." "Why do you think that?" "Because Mr. Harrison is the